Outside of maybe the Sennheiser HD600, I can think of no other headphone as controversial as the K702. Wait, maybe I actually can. I don't know. There may be other controversial headphones out there, but who cares? It sounded good. I just want to talk about the K702. This, like the HD600, is a headphone you'll likely hear about in some form or fashion even years before you get stuck in the rabbit hole with absolutely no hope of ever seeing the light of day ever again. Back then, the internet was in that land on a page and see walls of text for days phase, and though searching for answers on forums still exists, I feel as though it was a lot more prevalent some years ago. Or not, doesn't really matter. The point is that everyone and their grandma said the K702 was harder to drive than a blind person learning manual for the first time, but as it turns out,
that was a lie.
Yes, you're going to need some sort of an amp, but you don't need to mortgage away your dignity on street corners in the name of synergistic dynamism. It just isn't that serious, unless of course you're an audiophile who can hear my thoughts at plus 10 dB. And you thought I was gonna say something about hearing the grass growing. Well, I wasn't! In reality, the K702 is not that hard to drive, but it is fairly inefficient. That's the caveat, so do keep it in mind. Still, it works perfectly fine with pretty much every amp DAC I've ever tried, so please don't at me about this because I really don't give a damn. Build is a bit of a mixed bag, but I've had mine since 2019 and the only issue I've had is a small clear piece of plastic around the bail area. It's actually just an additional support and not the main piece, so there's been no negative effect on the way the hammock style adjustment operates. In any event, it's light but super robust and can take plenty of abuse. Maybe not Mick Foley levels of torture, but I would hope you're not psycho enough to treat your headphones like that. In any event, comfort is pretty phenomenal as the large, circular, and spacious sized ear cups leave plenty of room for your ears to breathe. The cups aren't all that deep, but they also don't intrude or dig into your ears, which is always a huge plus. But none of that is what I really wanted to talk about. In addition to the myth that these need freakish, obscure headphone amplifiers that no one's ever heard of or likely will ever hear of, they also have been accused of having an abnormally wide soundstage with no center image. Lack of a center image. This is another one I've heard quite a bit on the internet over the years, and while it's not as outlandish as the impossible to drive notion, it's still a bit of a misnomer. In reality, just because the K702 may not portray something in a certain spot, doesn't mean it was actually there. But then you'll say,
the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence.
What?
Simply because you don't have evidence that something does exist, does not mean that you have evidence that something doesn't exist.
What?
Jokes aside, the main point is that whoever engineered the song has the final say about how the track was panned. You got that? And there are a million songs out there. They're all going to be a bit different. No center image would basically be accusing producers of literally never putting something completely in the center, which as it turns out is about as unlikely as me never having to pee ever again from this point forward. What I personally feel the K702 does extremely well, perhaps better than anything else, is the way it spaces instruments and voices out while placing things in whatever spot that they were recorded in. This separation is the key ingredient to understanding the 702's greatness, because combined with everything else it's good at, results in an almost perfect sounding headphone from a purely neutral, diffuse field perspective. And no one can argue that. It pretty much represents the purest, most accurate representation of what a balanced headphone should sound like. In other words, it's tuned incredibly well. Is it completely balanced and neutral? Of course not. No headphone should be completely balanced in my opinion. See the K612 as a prime example of what too neutral sounds like. No, the K702 has a presence bump at approximately 2 to 3 kHz, some slight bass roll up before 40 Hz, and a bright neutral treble, which is just another way of saying it's mostly perfect. So the next time you hear someone say the K702 doesn't have enough bass, just roll your eyes and walk away. That said, for a bit of extra punch, the K702 is rather flexible given its excellent bass tuning. Just play around with 60 to 90 Hz on an equalizer and find out what works best. Then you can cut or dip the mud/bloat region slightly as well, or not, it's up to you. Just know that some kind of cut in these regions is generally preferred. No, the tuning of the bass as is isn't going to annihilate your brain, but it shouldn't. You should be able to hear bass notes, that's the point. You should also be able to hear other frequencies. Vocals and instruments will be the focus since they are typically the most important elements in a song and the hardest to get right. This is also elementary, but it feels like rocket science when you're trying to explain it to your average mouth breather. If all that wasn't enough, the K702's resolution and instrument timbre compete with headphones way out of its price range. No, it's not going to be better than something like an Ananda, Edition XS, or Aria in that regard, but the fact that it comes close at all should be all you need to know how good these are. For not being a planar magnetic, they are just about as good as one in every category, although planars do edge it out slightly. This is most apparent in genres that both headphones excel at, i.e. all of them, and was the most noticeable in listening to Sufjan Stevens, particularly the way he kind of sounds like he could be sharing a similar space with you. Yes, this is incredibly subtle and has a lot to do with the recording techniques to an extent, but headphones like the K702 give you a glimpse into what it may be like if someone was singing specifically for you rather than hearing them through headphone drivers. And like most things in life, it's exactly this thrill and longing for the unknown that leaves people broke and trying to sell cheeseburgers for more of that audio dope. Is the K702 the best headphone that was ever created? Of course not, but it makes a strong case for being perhaps the best headphone that has ever come out of the mid-fi category. And I've heard a lot of them. The K702, in my mind, stands head and shoulders above the majority and even competes with headphones way out of its price range. This is because it was tuned correctly and has perfect resolution at its price point. So buy it, and always remember to keep it dummy thick. Aight?